Here we go. Thank you everybody. We are live finally with the third workshop during this first online meeting, the first fully online meeting of the Pirate Party of Italy. In this struggle period, we decided to move on and have this online meeting. So I'm really happy to present all the participants and at this round table that we called the Future Society. The Future Society will be just an inspiring workshop, for all the good things we have in mind. We are pirates, and we have, this visionary idea of the future. And our first look is at Europe, our continent, where we are all now locked down in our countries, and that's why we are just having this conversation in English, because I'm happy to introduce many international participants here. So let me start from Oktavia Hrund Jonsdottir from Iceland, the vice chairperson of the European Pirate Party, and also a member of the Icelandic Pirate Party. We also have the pleasure to have here at this table Josep Costa, that is actually the vice president of the Catalan Parliament, and Virginia Fiume from Brussels, that is actually the Eumans coordinator and activist in Brussels, and also Marcel Kolaja, our elected MEP from Czech Republic, and Marianna Vintiadis, economist and great valuable minds from Milan. Marco Cappato will also join us, a great politician and activist from a long time from Italy, in just half an hour. So, plans for these 2 hours together. I would like to ask you to put on this table your ideas. Your ideas for what? Actually, for the future society. We're all struggling here in this lockdown, but we weren't thinking about just coming back to our old lives. I think that we all, humankind, deserve a better society. And this is the right occasion to think, huge, to really think for the very first time to the world, to the society we want and we like. Not just the previous one, not just back to the previous lives, just a new world. I always remember that in Italy, here in Tuscany, where I am, we had a terrific, something like one of the worst plague we have ever seen. But after that plague, the Renaissance period started. So I would like that this occasion could be really a new start, a new reborn, not only for Italy, for Catalunya, for Czech Republic, for Iceland, but for Europe and for the whole world. So, to make everyone comfortable, I would like to start putting my idea for a better society on the table, because I'm for sure the less valuable one at this table. So after me, everybody will be absolutely comfortable to speak. I was thinking about something in which I believe for a very, very long time. Let me introduce myself just a second. I'm a pirate activist since 2012. I chose 8 years ago to join the pirate movement because we were, can you remember, I mean, just in the middle of two crises, the first 2008, the second 2011, 12. It seems that, crisis after crisis, we are just moving on, tired, poor, without any ideas. And so I was barely 40, 41 probably. And I said to myself, okay, stop. Let's stop just complaining, just, nyeh, and try to do something for change this. I was searching around. I have a technical background, so I was always used to use the web for news for everybody, so for everything. And I just say, okay, I knew a lot of political party in Italy. I don't like it. Let me check, Europe. And I find out the pirate movement. At that time, pirate movement was raising up in Germany, especially in Germany. I can remember a lot of orange flags all over Germany. Pirate movement started actually from Sweden 6 years before, but then flowed down to all Europe incredibly. And I found out that there was not only in German, but in Italy too. I didn't really know anything about it. And so I said, let's join this movement. And since last 8 years, I never stopped. We are literally almost nothing in Italy, but for the very first time at last European election, you see, I just reproduced this. You see this was our flag for the last European election. All the Europe and all Italy, we were able to present our personal own list at last European election in all 5 regions in Italy. Without any budget, we took just around 60,000 votes, almost nothing, but it was a sign. And from that point, we think that we have just start a new course for this movement also in Italy. So, speaking about politics, I was thinking about a major issue in my mind that always, cycling just coming back. It's the universal basic income. The universal basic income. I'm not an economist. I'm sorry, Marianna, but I don't want to deep dive into all the economics trouble, because I think that politics come first, and then economy and society should follow. So, from a politics point of view, in my opinion, why a universal basic income right now? Because of freedom. I would like people to get rid about slavery, works slavery. To be alive, people has to be free. Right now, people work just to survive and not to live. The most of them. I'm pretty sure I work in Milan. I am actually a workaholic, but I have the good luck to work for patient, really for patient. But I am pretty sure that 80% of all workers in all Europe, if I'm talking about Europe, where poverty is not that rise, works just to survive. That means 12 hours a day around their working life. 2 hours to go to work, 1 hour to go to work, 1 hour back from work, 10 hours working. And then what? We don't have citizens. We have just, ghosts. How we could imagine that people can improve their skills, can follow politics, can just read books, stay with children, love their spouse or all the people that love. They have nothing. After 10, 12, 14 Ours, it remains really nothing. So my idea of the universal basic income is not only to balance all the poverty that this tremendous pandemic situation will cause in Europe, in the rich Europe, you know, everybody will be affected on this. Everyone, literally. I already know a lot of my friends that call me crying that they're losing jobs. They're closing their little companies. They had really lost everything. And instead of some, helicopter money or making more debts, just saying, please give me more money, please give me more. No, let's stop. This is an old way to think. Start from a different one. Cash for every single person in Europe, starting from children until grannies. Everyone has to be the right to be alive, for foods, for house, for clothes, an amount of money that keep you alive with no worries. Why I putting this on the table? Because it's not only a sustaining way to just let people not die on poverty soon. It's because we have something that we have never experienced before, an active welcome on returning. It's welfare back, because finally we have free citizen. We give power, we empower citizen by giving the first thing that we need, just money to survive. I remember when I read for the very first time the Rutger Berger book, the famous one, the Utopia for Realists. I remember this little example in that book. The conservative governor of Ohio in the United States has a tremendous problem. The tremendous problem was homeless. A lot of homeless, increasing year by year, thousands of homeless all over his state. He tried everything, just, punish them, jailing them, everything, really everything. The problem never solved. He spent a lot of public money on it, and people were annoyed about having all this homeless in all the big cities of Ohio. Suddenly, he decided to give to the citizen another solution. So, which is the basic problem with homeless? House. So, he literally built new house and rent new flats, new hotel for all homeless, one by one. After 3 years, homeless fell down to zero. And guess what? He just put the bill on the community. He said, and you know what? In 3 years, giving a house to thousands of homeless costed less than fighting for them, for keeping away. Okay, so we think that sorry, that's my future idea, and that's why I put the UB on the table. Of course, a UB, universal basic income, need, of course, the definition of a country, of a boundary. And in my opinion, the first boundary should be Europe. Okay. I know that this could cause a lot of troubles, but I'm pretty sure that it would be less than ever. So, Octavia, would you mind to continue to put some ideas on this table? Chair is yours.
Thank you, Alessandro. I think it's very interesting, as beautiful and diverse and pragmatic that Europe can be. Sometimes, and I feel like I'm in great company. I don't really, this is an amazing roundtable that you put together, and I can't wait to listen to others speak. But sometimes living on an island, basically a rock in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, far away from everyone, makes Iceland probably feel a little bit like a cousin that comes to visit once in a while. We were isolated for a very long time. Due to the internet and many other fantastic things, we are not as isolated anymore. And although we're not a part of the European Union, we are a part of the European Economic Area. And we are very connected, and we are a part of many different international bilateral and multilateral organizations or unions, and that's for a reason. I think we more perhaps than others understand what isolation does. And that's why it is remarkable to me that people that live in my country still believe in isolationism, and the the events of the last couple of weeks and months for some have shown that we still have that this fear within us that says we have to come together as ourselves against the other or against them still exists. It exists in our politics, and it exists in the way that we foresee our future. And I think that those are some of the points that perhaps I'd like to touch upon. You mentioned living. I think living is important. Is an important question, not just from the point of what are the basic needs that we have or need to do so, but also some of the points that you mentioned, Alessandro, on the dream that we want to continue to live or work towards. And that dream, particularly in the current state and as we look to the future, I think has to do with systems. Now, I'm going to take a moment to sound like a nerd and absolutely like a pirate. But more than any other time in my living time, and I'm fortunate enough to be in my 40s and have lived through very quiet times in Northern Europe. I was present for the wall coming down in Berlin and in Germany. I was present for many of the Cold War ending, many of the things that have given us a more calm and peaceful world. And yet now we're seeing that the enemy is no longer another country or an ideology. It is that our earth is dying and we're not doing anything about it. It is that a virus can come and a disease from that virus can cripple all of us. And we will be confined and isolated, not because we believe in antiquated ideologies of the past, but because it is a necessity for survival. And that, I think, is going to be detrimental to the way in which we think of the future to come. However, getting back to the nerdiness, I don't think that we necessarily need to overturn governments. I don't necessarily think that we need to start from scratch. I don't necessarily think that we need to set up more systems than the ones that we already have. What we need to do is to understand that the systems that we have are no longer working. We need to critically look at the situations that we're in and say, are they still doing what they need to be doing for the purpose in the future that we have not yet reached? And what I mean by that is whether you are working within systemic processes that were put forth by representative democracies that are no longer working from a constitution that is relevant to you as a society, Whether you're working in a country where the patriarchy and the systems of the patriarchy continue to have detrimental effect to the way that children are brought up, or that continue to reinforce antiquated systems of inequality, then that is what you need to reconsider. So we already have a lot of systems. What we need to do is dismantle those, understand what power is, what success is, and why we continue to measure it from the past and not in sense of the future. I think I came into politics probably fairly late compared to most people. I've been an active activist though since my early teens, and yeah, I cannot name the number of streets that I have walked down, pounded on, the number of signs that I've made, the number of speeches that I've held for us to make changes, and that, yeah, since the beginning of the 90s, which compared to now seemed like a beautiful time in many ways. But I think it was because we didn't face the challenges that we do today. So for us to have the future that encompasses the possibility and the prosperity that we need, we have to take a step back and we have to look at things not from an antiquated left or right perspective. Politics today, when it's still looked at as left or right, is doing a disservice to every member of the European Union. There is nothing left or right about climate change. There is nothing left or right about coronaviruses like COVID-19. There is nothing left or right about our fundamental and basic needs, whether those are basic income or healthcare. What we need to start doing is we need to update or look at new systems that truly stop looking at the left right and start looking at the future or the past. So learning from the past, absolutely, but with the lens and the focus of the future is what we're going to have to learn ourselves and teach each other to do. Universal basic income, when first introduced in Parliament in Iceland, was introduced by the Pirate Party 6.5 years ago. I cannot count the number of articles that were mocking, demeaning. I cannot. It's hard for me to begin to talk about the comments that the woman, the pirate that's still in Parliament today, got when she introduced this, or the way in which it was received. It was received within a system that would never be able to allow a different way of thinking. And that's my point, right? So today, universal basic income is a white paper that was passed by Parliament. It means that the government has an obligation to look at ways in which universal basic income can be adopted in Iceland. I have firm belief that that will be an actual law in Iceland. I believe that we will pass and put forth universal basic income. Not from a leftist point of view, but from a rightist point of view. Because ultimately, if you're going to speak in old terms, this makes the most sense from a right political point of view. And it just so happens that it also makes sense from a left point of view. And this is why I think we need to start not talking left or right, but talk past or future. And find that sweet balance point between the needs for the system to limit, change, or dictate behavior of the society and the individual's right to their freedom. So in my future, in our future, I am hoping that we not only look at the content of our policies and our politics, but we absolutely dedicate all of our resources, all of our people, our time, our money, anything, our passions, to dismantling the current systems that will never truly allow freedom of the individual to exist within a society that still needs to have us governed for each other and by each other. So I think from my point of view, that is the important part. It's understanding from what point we're speaking, to what future, including who, and many of the changes that I want to see we can do in our everyday life. Whenever you call a meeting, look around the table and see who wasn't invited. Whenever you look around that table of people meeting, look at who is not speaking up, whose opportunities are we missing. What glorious madness and inspiring thought are we not hearing because we continue to set things up in old systems. But I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oktavia. Thank you for your inspiring words. I knew it. So thank you. And if you don't mind, Josep, would you like to put your ideas from your point of view on the table? We would be glad to hear you, Josep.
Okay, thanks for this invitation. I think this is so far a very interesting panel, and this is going to be a very rich discussion, I believe. I think the current situation allows us to go back to the basics of why we have political institutions in the first place. I think, there are a lot of authors that have written or developed theories about risk society and how risks are an element that's intrinsic to the kind of society we live in. And so managing risk is one of the basic challenges of any society. And in this moment, this point of history, that cannot be understated. I think this disease, this virus that's spreading around the world, stresses our vulnerability before other challenges, before the risk society that we live in. So I think that underscores the need for the kind of political institutions we have in place. And I agree that we don't need to build a new system from scratch. We just need to fix a lot of things of the current system. But there is something about the existing political institutions or the state as the institution that's very relevant at this very moment. I think the state is to provide some kind of insurance against risks. And in some areas, it has to be a universal insurance for all citizens, for all residents under the same political authority. And of course, the idea of a universal basic income, I think, is best understood as an insurance. A lot of people have presented it as some instrument to fight poverty or to help the less well-off in the society, etc. But I think that is a limited explanation, or is a limited version of this idea of a universal basic income, because I think it's best understood as a universal insurance against poverty. So it's not for people that are now in poverty. Just like insurance is not for people who are in trouble, it's to protect people against trouble. And obviously, that I think that idea works better if you or it's more convincing if you present it this way, because if someone has an accident, you may have a discussion on who has to pay for the harm that was created or generated by that accident. And so that's why we invented insurance, because it may be any of us can have that accident, can be in that position. So that's the point of having insurance against accidents. But in the case of income, obviously there are a lot of people who don't feel the need to be insured against the loss of income. But this situation of pandemic probably underscores the need to have that kind of insurance, and for a lot of people to realize that you can be in a situation that's completely unforeseen and also inevitable to the extent that you never thought you would be. And you may, or a lot of people probably thought that they would never need some sort of subsidy from the state. But in this situation of a lockdown of cities and towns around the world, a lot of people who never expected to be without income are indeed without income. And governments are now putting in place emergency rescue plans to help people to deal with this situation of loss of income. And there are many countries that have put in place this rescue plans, like they're sending checks to the people without need for very complicated justifications or controls. I mean, for example, Canada, I know that have established some sort of scheme that you can apply online, and in a couple of days you have a check or a debit in your account. I think in Germany, businesses have had this emergency help as well. Even the US, who a lot of people think is a very conservative or a system of government that favors this laissez-faire, they have put in place a scheme that's sending checks to everyone in the country to help with this situation. So I think this is the ideal moment to have a massive experiment with universal basic income. And I think there are many virtues to this scheme. There are many arguments for it, and I think that they outweigh the arguments against very clearly. And I think in a situation like the present one, it's very easy to see these arguments in favor of the basic income. And I think I would argue that the best argument is that it allows us to see it as an insurance rather than as some sort of scheme to help the poor. It's not only about obviously it is an argument, a moral argument to help those who are less well off, but it's the argument of a universal insurance is a good one. I mean, obviously I'm in favor of a universal basic income that's as previously presented. It's something that's giving cash to people, not giving something else, not giving shelter or food, but giving them money. It's unconditional, so it's not about asking them to work instead or accept jobs, etc. So it's unconditional and has to be universal. And obviously, if you put it that way, it sounds like, well, this has got to be too expensive and too difficult to implement. But the reality is, as you can see with some of the examples that I mentioned earlier, there are some elements to it that make it much easier to make it a reality. In the case of the US, for example, the universal check that's sent to everyone, it's understood to be an account payment on a future tax scheme, right? So it's something it's going to be taken into account next year when you pay your taxes. So in that sense, yes, obviously the basic income should be for everyone. It should be universal, but for most people, or for a lot of people, it might be, or would probably need to be neutral in terms of what income they get in the end after paying taxes. So for a lot of people, for like upper middle class people, they would get this universal income, but then they would effectively pay the same amount in new taxes. So they would live with the same amount of money they have now. But they would still have an advantage, is that if they were to lose their job, or they were to have confront a lockdown like this, they would not be at risk of having no income. So they would be insured against losing their income by all accounts. And so that gives a lot of advantages, as I indicated. I think it enhances freedom. I mean, in the sense that there's a lot of less bureaucracy involved. People are not stigmatized for not having income or not having a job. So people are all treated equal by the system. So we're also treated with equal dignity, in a sense. And it's also efficient from a point of from an economic point of view. I mean, obviously, if we only consider the new money that needs to be printed, and by the way, I think the current situation has also generated a consensus in favor of another idea that seems to be quite crazy, but it's not. And that's what economists call the helicopter money. The idea of giving free money to everyone. And that's in the case of a disaster, of a pandemic like we're facing now. It's an idea that the most conservative economists and the most left-wing economists might agree on, that if any time, this time is good for giving helicopter money to people. But there are a lot of savings that would be gained with a basic income, with a scheme of universal basic income. Obviously, we would save on every subsidy that we have to put in place for the unemployed, for the poor, for the homeless, etc. So all those schemes that are sometimes very complicated to run, that need to employ a lot of people, sometimes like social workers or people that have to run these programs to help the poor in the societies, that would no longer be needed. And obviously that would reduce the costs of healthcare, reduce some numbers of mortality. Indeed, it would reduce crime. It would probably help improve our school success rates, etc. So even it would solve problems in terms of inequalities within families, violence against women. A lot of situations would be avoided. A lot of positive benefit would be created by such a scheme. So I think I would finish with an idea that's I think has been used a lot of times to defend the basic income, and that was put forward by The Economist, the journal, that says that the most efficient, from an economic point of view, way to spend money on the homeless might be actually to give the money to them. And that's maybe counterintuitive, but we're in a good position to have that vast experiment now. A lot of governments are actually putting schemes in place that resemble the kind of universal basic income that I'm defending, and we would maybe we would be able to see that it's not so difficult to implement. The incentives are not so bad as a lot of people say, and that the difficulties can be easily overcome. And maybe we can establish it as an emergency plan and then leave it in place for future situations like this, like a universal insurance. And that's, I think, in the current society, something I think, and I agree that this goes beyond the left-right divide. In fact, as you sure know, liberal and Marxist economists alike have defended this idea of the basic income, and I think we all agree that the state is there to help us, to protect us in these situations of serious crisis.
Thank you, Josep. Thank you very much. In the meanwhile, I see Marco Cappato join us. So Marco, just introduce you all the rest of the table. Probably,
thank you. I'm sorry for being late.
Don't worry. Just have you the patience to wait until after a little introduction. We are just at the table during this first online Pirate Party of Italy Congress, and the future table is just opened. And before you, Oktavia Hrund Jonsdottir from Iceland spoke, and after her, Josep Costa from the vice president of the Catalan Parliament, and we have now Virginia Fiume, that the Eumans coordinator in Brussels, and Marcel, Kolaja, our MEP elected from Czech Republic, and just before you, Marianna Vintiadis. So all the economists and all great economists bring at the end, but you, of course, you are welcome as politician as well. A long story of politicians, many fights, right, Marco?
Yeah. So, but the future are the most important.
Yeah, actually, future is what we are living now. Future is present. Yesterday, I was impressed. We started this Congress yesterday evening at around 7 o'clock, and another activist, another politician from Italy, Sergio Delia, spoke, and finally said something that just enlightened my mind. It was that visionary are the realist. So in such a way, I would like to be at least a visionary. So Virginia, would you mind to put on the table your future ideas, your ideas for future?
Yes, of course. And thanks for organizing this panel, which is very warm, and it's nice to have this feeling. I would like to start from the situation that we are in, where I think a key word is fragility. So everything is so fragile, like us as human beings, the society in itself, the democratic institutions, and everything is so under pressure that if we don't find the best way to take care of this fragility, we risk to find ourselves at last. And in my opinion, the most important thing to look at the present, to do now, to build the right future, is to make sure that democracy as we know it keeps functioning. but not, and I deeply agree with what Oktavia was saying, not in the sense of keep functioning exactly in the same way, but be better. And in my opinion, and I have an anthropology background, so I tend to look at things in a societal manner as much as possible. If you don't take care properly of a trauma as a society, you don't move to the next level. And I think this is the moment where democracy should take back its meaning, which is the people. We can't rely only on the institutions to solve the situation. We need to make sure that there is a connection, a real connection, a real trust between the citizens and the different type of democratic institutions. If we don't work into this line of trust, the pressure is too much and the system cannot hold in the sense of what we mean with it. I make you an example. Together with the Eumans and a lot of other European organizations, we presented a petition to the European Parliament on how to manage the COVID-19 emergency from a social, economic, and climate perspective. And whilst doing that, we pushed so that the petition committee of the European Parliament would discuss the petition, listening to the citizens. The outcome of this effort was that a lot of other petitioners are being called to present their proposal to Europe. And you know better than me, because we have a few members of the parliament, that a petition is an instrument of participatory democracy that can activate just by one citizen. So you don't need to belong to any party, to any organization, to any network. You are a person that raised its voice toward the institution. So yesterday, I was trying to contact the other petitioners to see why they use the instrument and how they use it. And I had an email exchange with these guys called Jonathan Biddle. He's a British guy. I don't know exactly why I was able to submit a petition, but maybe the MEP can explain me. I appreciate that. I'm very happy that he still can do it. Probably has a double citizenship. But basically, Jonathan is the father of a guy who is a volunteer in the Greek islands in Lesbos. And he felt so deeply the injustice of the situation of migrants in the Greek islands that he felt he needed to do something. And what I found fascinating was that, among other stuff that he could have done, was sending a petition to an institution, which is, in the common opinion, the most far away from the daily life of people. And I think we need to find ways in this moment to leverage the instinct that some people have to rely on institutions and to try to link and connect. So I think if I have to share a vision for the future of society, is a society where the citizens are fully aware and informed of the instruments that they have to shape the policies, but not just a campaign, a poster in the streets. It's really like an educational, informative element as a citizen that you can use the institutions. And this, I think, if it's done properly, can connect multiple people using similar tools and creating links and connection that goes beyond the individual or the individual organization. I think another thing that the coronavirus crisis is showing is that it can't be solved by one doctor, it can't be solved by one research institute, it can't be solved by one national state, and to be honest, not even, in my opinion, by only the European Union. It's really a time for creating these type of connections. So going back to my point is how to reinforce the democratic system at this moment. I think it's time to really empower the instruments for participation of citizens, but also, on the other side, to empower those who are in power to not see the citizens as token, as like a representation. Okay, oh, and we have a couple of citizens who are gonna say something. No, it's really like the time to reimagine how this relationship should work. I'm gonna close with one last example that is very important for me. There was a process in place for the Conference on the Future of Europe, which was this combination of the three main European institutions and the citizens to sit together for 2 years in a process of redesigning the future of Europe. the decision due to the coronavirus, it seems to be to suspend this process. And in my opinion, this is crazy, because you can't deal with a trauma, with an emergency, locking yourself. I mean, we should lock down, but locking yourself in the ivory tower or in the experts, and that's it. There is the need for this dialogue that is injected and transformed. So I think we really need to empower the citizens to be able to have I call it a transformative democratic capabilities. So to feel my urgency, to know what I have to do to transform it in something that is institutionalized, recognized, and potentially part of a wider network. And to conclude, we are at the Pirate Party Congress, so I probably don't need to explain why I praise the whole concept of the link. I think the web is based on the concept of the link, which means to connect with each other, to recognize when someone else knows something better, and to give them the credit for that. And you lose a bit of identity when you leave someone leaving your website to go on another website. But I think it's a moment where identity, also of organizations, is less important than the goal that you have, the instruments that you choose to use, and the power that you can have for the interest of society. So that's the thing. I think a real democracy available for citizens and as part of the blood and bones of citizenship.
Thanks, Virginia. Thanks a lot. As you know, I was learning from Iceland to have some new gesture for having, it's like this one. This one means that we appreciate, and then there is this one that we appreciate. Sorry. This one we appreciate a lot, and then there is another one like this that we appreciate very, very much. So. I agree with you. I agree with you that identity is nothing without ideas. Ideas are much more important. We are for absolutely sharing things against any copyright, any because if an idea is totally you believe in that and is totally good, the best is to share it. Like a novelist, if you write a novel, the most important thing is not that you own the novel, that it's someone can read your novel. Otherwise, it's not a novel. So thank you very much, Virginia, for your speech. And I would like also, from Alpha Pirate, because actually I was wondering that inviting you, the mixed for, we have some pirates and non-pirates here at the table, but in my opinion you are all pirates, because we are all pirates in our hearts. That's why I feel very, very comfortable having you all at the table, and probably also the other who are not at this table, they are pirates too, and we need to fight for them. We need to allow for their voices. They cannot be at the table. So from a pirate in pectore to a pirate also in standings, Marcel, would you like to take your ideas at the table, please?
So hello to everyone again. Thank you for the invitation, and I need to say that I'm really happy to be part of the pirate movement. For 10 years now, actually, and it's been a ride to get to the point where I got elected into the European Parliament. It of course cost sweat and pain, but I think it paid off. But the journey basically only begins, and this movement is apparently international. This very panel is one of the evidence of it. There have been pirate parties that became really successful lately, and there are some that will become really successful in the future. I'm pretty sure about that. So thanks for organizing this. And given that we talk about our vision of a future society, and given also that I am a member and vice president of the European Parliament, which means that I should not only give visions, but also I am expected to deliver. I would like to take the approach of basically showing in a couple of areas, like 7 different areas, what we have done recently, what we have come through as humankind, as society, and try to explain what I think is the way for the future, because I think we need to reflect on the past to understand what the future should be. And the first area that I picked is democracy and the tools that we've been using for exercising democracy. And I think it's no exaggeration whatsoever if I say that this crisis is unprecedented in a way. Parliaments all over the world have been struggling with how they continue with delivering democracy and following the democratic process based on democratic principles, when often the representatives cannot physically meet. And this is especially the case for the European Parliament, where MEPs come from different corners of Europe. And I think it will become really obvious through my introductory speech, throughout my introductory speech, that crisis basically means amplifications of the issues that we have been having maybe for some time, but now we really see it, how these issues are affecting us in situations, in a situation like this. So the Parliament suddenly, the European Parliament suddenly appeared in a situation when we were in the need of using tools that would allow remote participation. And one of, I would say, the crucial differences of the pirate movement over any other political movement that arose before the pirates is that the pirates were always used to using remote participation, always, because we have basically arose from that grassroots, from people who were used to participate remotely. And that's not necessarily always the same for official institutions. So as much as members of the Parliament, as much as staff is used to using video conferencing and chat systems, it's basically only under normal conditions it's supplementary, but now it became the core of the business of the Parliament. And so there are, official meetings that need to be held remotely. There are votings that need to be and decisions that need to be taken remotely. And the Parliament suddenly happened to be in a situation when no one expected anything like that. And as a coincidence, I am vice president for the informatics and telecommunications. So I am working really hard with the respective services of the parliament to introduce and improve the systems that we currently have. And over there, I insist on the systems to be secure, which means if we have a video conferencing system where we hold meetings, we need a secure system that is provided on a secure basis and is not, let's say, in the hands of someone else. And for instance, we need to have a guarantee that if we have meetings where sensitive communication is happening, that these meetings are really, confidential. But as I said, this is nothing new, right? Members and staff of the parliament were used to do video conferencing from time to time. And they were used to using third-party systems, but now the issue is really amplified, and it's not only for video conferencing; it's chat system. It's very the same. There are so many chat systems, chat platforms on the internet. I bet that you have several applications installed so that you can communicate with other people, but which of them are really secure that you can use it for policy making, that you can have official communication, confidential communication, for instance, in there. And over there, being it video conf, being it chat, I am of the opinion that the parliament needs to be able to provide for its operation, which means for the members of the parliament and for the staff, to provide systems that will ensure all this. They should not rely on third-party systems. And that is something that we can take from the crisis and learn from the crisis and say, yeah, in the future, also after the crisis, the parliament should be able to provide this. And this is what I am pushing for in the parliament. The second area that I have chosen is internal market. It became apparent that the lockdowns on the circulation of goods didn't really help, because if medical equipment gets stuck in one country where other country is desperately waiting for the delivery to reach them, so that doctors have protective medical equipment, etc., then it's not really a great situation. So the exceptions to the first free circulation on the internal market really need to be justified and proportionate. So I believe that we really need to move forward with opening the internal market, having an operational, the sooner we do it, so the sooner we fully implement green lanes, where we will be able, in the case of partial border closure, to ensure free circulation of goods, the better for Europe, and the easier way out of this crisis. Third area that I have chosen is knowledge and technologies, and that really relates to the lockdown that patents and monopolies cause. And as I said, the crisis only amplifies the issues that we've been having already. We've been seeing already, how patent trolls are detriment to the whole society. And but now we really need to make sure that that manufacturing is not hold back, and production of equipment that we desperately need now in the crisis is not held back by patents and monopolies. And we really need to ensure that a potential vaccine that someday will be available is not owned by one single company that will just make a fortune out of it, and the whole humankind would suffer from it, basically. So I have signed an initiative of Médecins Sans Frontières, calling for the Commission to take necessary actions, like that patents and monopolies should not restrict manufacture and production, and there should be no exclusive licenses on diagnostic tools and vaccines. And actually, non-exclusive licensing should be a precondition to any EU funding. And open technologies, apparently, is something that now in this crisis is showing the upsides, right? We can 3D print the equipment that technically can be 3D printed and that we desperately need, and patents should not hold us back. So I believe that what we learn from this crisis is that we need some systemic issues. Is it review of the patent system? Is it open source licensing for anything that is public funded? I think these are the questions that we need to have on the table and discuss really, really thoroughly, because I believe that we really need some structural changes. My fourth area that I have chosen is fundamental rights, which I believe upholding them is not contradictory to effectively addressing the crisis. Unfortunately, what we have been seeing in some of the member states is that, for instance, I can name Poland and Hungary. The governments are misusing or abusing the crisis into passing laws that otherwise would have a huge, public outcry. But now, when people cannot gather outside, it might be perceived easier for the government to pass these laws, or suspending the parliament in Hungary. And I think this is something that is completely unacceptable. Another fundamental right that we need to talk about is privacy and data protection. I think it's legitimate to find a smart way out of the crisis, but it's not legitimate to diminish privacy just because of it and abuse the crisis to gather more and more data. Applications that people would be encouraged to install on their phones definitely need to be open source. Otherwise, they can never be sure what that black box is doing on their phone if it's not open source. And that's completely unacceptable. And last but not least, on fundamental rights, freedom of expression. Automated measures are, taking actions in some of the platforms, and as we pirates always criticize, they do perform false positives, and this really happened in this crisis. That there was very important information about COVID-19, which was blocked on Facebook because automated technologies, they misinterpreted the information as a false information, as disinformation, and it was blocked. My own blog post that on the Commission's call for SMEs that they can ask for funding when they have a project that could help fight COVID-19 were blocked on Facebook. So I can even tell from my own experience that this really happened, and it's completely unacceptable. And as I said already a couple times, and I will maybe repeat, this crisis amplifies the issues that we've been having. Automated technologies on content moderation without human oversight are just absolutely unacceptable, because they go against our fundamental rights. What do we do after the crisis? This is apparently not the first crisis of where the first European crisis, and we could even see in the past that a crisis can lead into more integration in the European project. Like, for instance, migration. The issues with migration led to more cooperation on border management. So we don't know at this moment where this would lead, but I can really imagine that this would open and should open discussions about more coordination among member states, because looking back, whenever the member states wanted to deal on their own with the crisis, it led to failure. The ECDC, the European Center for Disease Prevention and Control, warned already in January about the upcoming pandemic. The Commission started mobilizing money already in January, and when the member states did not basically listen to ECDC, then they had to react in panic a couple of weeks later. So coordination when it comes to mobilizing resources, when it comes to repatriation flights, when it comes to medical material coordination, patients exchange. I really liked the solidarity across Europe. When Germany took patients from Italy, for instance. Well, this is what we should learn from, to see the examples where it worked, what worked, what didn't work, and it apparently shows more cooperation is better. We deal better with crisis in Europe if we cooperate more. We need to understand that the Commission is nothing like a EU government that can close schools and shops, but we apparently through the European projects we can ensure more cooperation that help us to deal with the crisis. And the last area that I have picked, or last two, is on economy, which touches also agriculture. And I would like to say from the beginning of this that I've been hearing a lot about restarting the economy after crisis. I don't think we need that. We need to restructure the economy, not to restart it. This is not the only crisis that we are in. We are also in the climate crisis, and that has not faded away. Maybe there was some alleviation coming from that there's not so many flights over Europe, but still we are in this fight for climate. And if we go with the shortcut to invest into polluting sectors, and I have already seen such intentions, then it will very easily lead us to another crisis. The Green New Deal is one of the crucial ideas how to lead us out of the crisis, how to get the economy work again, and we need to restructure in order in order to modernize and in order to have a working economy that is sustainable. Second field on economy, tax evasion and abuse of subsidies. And again, this has been happening for some time already, but the crisis has shown to which extent this is a huge problem. When everyone is struggling for money, and big corporations are often, making a lot of money, but not really giving back through taxes, evading taxes. So we definitely need a digital tax. We need a common consolidated tax base. We need faster anti-money laundering implementation, public country-by-country reporting, and Europe definitely needs to move together on taxes. Otherwise, corporations will always be able to walk around the various tax systems and evade taxation. And last point I wanted to make, which comes back to not only to economy but also to the climate crisis, is the common agriculture policy reform. We truly need to have a reform of that policy in order to deal with the climate crisis. For instance, in the Czech Republic, there is a huge issue with droughts. The summer seasons are really dry. And they are becoming really dry over the course of the past years, and we cannot also, afford sending a lot of money into huge corporations that just know how to take that European money. So we truly need a reform that will help us on both of these. And I'll stop here. That was my ideas for the future society after the crisis.
Thank you, Marcel. I've wrote many things. I paperless. You just leave me paperless, but not idealess. So thank you for your long speech, Marianna. After Marcela, would you like to put on the table something more, or even just come back to, because I just write something. I realized that I wrote half a book. So thank you for now and also for the incoming ideas.
Okay, thank you. It is a daunting task, to be honest. I am a simple citizen. I am not a politician. I am not used to thinking in such broad and complex terms, I have to admit. And as such, I had not less of an aspiration, I would say, or a hope, as I will explain, but maybe focusing on a little bit more on 2 or 3 areas rather than having a very broad approach, which of course is inevitable if you have to decide the future of a continent. I would start maybe that my predominant aspiration is that we have seen the world essentially divide into 3 areas into 3 superpowers, if we want, and Europe remains the biggest market for the moment. I think struggling, but still is, according to the latest statistics. I would like Europe not just to be a single market. I would like Europe to be the leader. I would like to be the new freedom of the world and to show the light where the other 2 superpowers are lagging dramatically behind. America has claimed to be the beacon of democracy and freedom. I have reasons to doubt this. They're not the topic of this conversation, but I think we should not be following their example, but set a new one. Just before this pandemic hit Europe, we had been going through a substantial period of increasing distrust in Europe's institutions, reactions, the exit of one country, not small incidents, And I do believe that the underlying reason for a lot of this collapse in trust is economic in nature. I firmly believe that our policies that have neglected too much the impact of this inequality, income inequality, and its impact on society has been a huge underlying problem that we have not discussed in our tables enough. I was very, very hit with your comment about who isn't invited at the table, and I think inequality hasn't been invited at the table enough. It has, but not enough. But what form did this trust really take? In what language was it cast in predominantly in my mind? It was in the lack of transparency of EU institutions. And lack of transparency, I think, may or may not be true. But I think it comes connected to an underlying problem that also has to do with income inequality and the way we have chosen to run things, which is knowledge and education. So, of course, whether institutions are easy or difficult to penetrate, it's going to be much harder to do if we are unable, if we do not have the tools with which to read these institutions, understand how they operate, where to go to find the information, make sense of it, and understand it. And I think the issue of knowledge here as a prerequisite for any reform of our future society, for any aspiration of free citizens, how can we establish what our choice is? How can we express our vote, our appreciation, or, how can we express our idea about data protection, for example, when we don't actually understand how it all works? We need to be put in a condition as citizens to understand. We need to be given the tools. And I think we need to overcome this obstacle, because if we don't regain trust in the institutions, any attempt in Europe to fix things is going to be much, much harder, because it will be blocked by a public that is skeptical, that doesn't believe. Starting to address a public that doesn't believe in what you're about to say is much harder than speaking to an audience which is already captive. And this is something I think we need to really reflect about. And I have been considering this in the last few weeks in the whole debate about app tracing. Now, why are people so paranoid about app tracing? Because the fact of the matter is that we don't really understand the technology behind it. But, and this is not a problem about how much we're experts in technology, but my view is that the underlying structure, which is the GDPR structure that we have given ourselves in Europe, is not the correct instrument. We have cheated, in a way, involuntarily, our citizens from an understanding, a proper understanding. So when you get your documents from Facebook and from Gmail and whoever, it says, if you want to carry on using this service, you have to accept these terms, right? And everybody seems to complain about how long these terms are. The fact that the content is incomprehensible is a secondary concern. And what I mean by incomprehensible is not that you cannot read it, because of course GDPR does say that you have to be clear and succinct about what you're going to do with the data. But what you're being told is nowhere near what is actually happened. So the way I put it is that we're being told the truth, and we're being told nothing but the truth, but we're not being told the whole truth. And what I mean by that is that, yes, you are being told that, your data is going to be profiled and it's going to be used for marketing purposes, and it's going to be, but how many people understand how a beacon works in a supermarket, and that you stop in front of a yogurt stall and it knows how long it takes an average person to make a decision to buy a yogurt. And so it knows whether you've probably bought it or not. And so what I get, and this is in my business capacity, which is not the object here, but I do get people coming to me on a daily basis now, paranoid about their phones, saying my phones are spying me. And that is because they don't understand how they work. And they don't understand how they work because GDPR, which is the only rule that it imposes on companies to tell people how things work, doesn't point to the right direction. The underlying basis of us understanding data is wrong, okay? It is not about what uses, the mapping of the data that we have imposed on companies is a massive bureaucratic instrument that doesn't give citizens any rights, any further freedom in really choosing what is happening to them, and no further understanding or knowledge. And I think this is partly inevitable because this is extremely sophisticated now, and we need to understand it at a very different level. I do think that when Cambridge Analytica happened, politicians were taken aback as much as the general public. It's not that some people knew and others didn't. It was that very, very few people actually understood how this system works. And the second thing, which is a key limitation in GDPR, is that it concentrates on personal data, as if aggregate data didn't matter. And actually, think about it this way. One European telecoms company just 3 years ago published a very interesting study about how people flowed in and out of Florence, right? So they mapped based on the GSM, connections, who was coming in, who was coming out, what nationality they were, whether they stayed in the center at night, whether they went back home, etc., where they had come from before they come to the center. Great study. Everybody hailed it as, a new era in data analytics, and the privacy watchdog had nothing to say about it. Why? Because it was anonymous. But think about it this way. Think if it were a political party that had actually congregated that day in the center of the town. And we'd have an analysis, maybe not of who went there, although the telecoms company has this information, but even at an aggregate level, where they came from, how they congregated, how long they stayed. Now, if we don't think that this poses an issue about freedoms, I think we've lost the plot, sincerely. I think we have a much, much bigger problem than simply, changing an article here or there. We need a fundamental rethinking and the understanding of rethinking of data, because this is going to be a data society. Data may be what will get us out of COVID. I'm not against, I'm not a Luddite. I want more data. But I want us to understand how it works. I want to be confident that those who regulate it understand it and look after my freedoms as a citizen. And right now, I don't see this. And this is the first thing I want for my future Europe. I want to be free, I want to be informed, and I have to have the tools that will allow me to make these decisions freely. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianna. Thank you very much. I was, literally shaking my hands as the Icelandic way, because I want to be free too, and I want to feel myself freedom, because safe comes later. Safe comes when freedom is, not the opposite, not the other way around. So thank you very much. So Marco, thanks for your patience. And now it's your turn to close this first round. And actually, I wouldn't stop you all, because I would expect to really a first round a bit more quick, but I wasn't able to stop anybody of you because I was listening, and listening for me is something astonishing. I always, speaks a lot, but listen is much, much better. Incredible, Okta. So, Marco, you want to share with us your ideas for the future society?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you to the Pirates, to all the members of the Pirates Party, and of course to the other speakers for this very interesting discussion. I also think that if we discuss about the future, the main topic about which we have to discuss is knowledge. And as Marianna was saying, the real value, the real good upon which democracy is depending, and also the possibility of a real democracy and even of a real free market is depending, is knowledge. So I heard the first intervention about the universal basic income, and also the reference of Marianna to the issue of equality. And I think we should link the dots and talking about a basic income of knowledge, even before money. We need to put the people as far as possible at the same level is impossible, but with the same minimum background of information and quality information. And this, for me, should be applied about two main things. The first is education. I totally agree with that. So the education also to have a critical mind, education to the scientific method. This is very important for our school system because is less and less important to learn things at schools like dates, facts, or simple information, because this we can find it on the internet in a way. We need critical thinking, the ability to process information, to achieve knowledge through discussion, through the quest for knowledge. So this is the first thing. The second thing I think is about artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence is more and more clear that it will be the driving force for future society. And nowadays, this process is driven by companies and states. Companies, in order to sell goods and services to the people in a more sophisticated way, even through the manipulation of the consumer and the problem of privacy that Marianna was talking about. The second process is the process of artificial intelligence managed by the state in order to control us or to censor us. And the combination of the two is even the most worrisome. So business information used for state control. What is completely lacking is a process of investment on artificial intelligence for public goods, in the interest of the people, to empower the citizen, also to make the citizens in condition to be to participate, as Virginia was saying, to participate through the instrument of democracy to the public debate. So going back to the universal basic income, I agree with the idea that we need to do something face to the mounting inequalities, but I think that the priority, more than distributing money, is distributing knowledge and distributing information. Of course, money also is important, but I wouldn't like it as a result to give up to the idea that only a small minority of people are the people that are that have the power to control the information, okay? And for the others, we just give them the material economic condition to survive without having too many problem in finding, I don't know, food or a shelter, or no, a home or a basic need, because this society would be a tremendously unequal society, even if we would be able to eliminate extreme poverty, even if we would be able to give the basic economic welfare to everybody, but if only a slight minority of society is the one controlling the information, the software, how artificial intelligence is working, how our telephone is working, how at the end our smart cities are working. So our cities, our society, our economy, we risk to create a system of master and servants, and a universal basic income, if it's only based by money, will not be enough to reverse this situation. So I think that from a political point of view, the priority should be, I would call it a universal basic income of knowledge, or level of knowledge, through education and through investment on a civic artificial intelligence. And then, of course, this would not eliminate the need for a welfare state for basic needs as home, food, and work, and so on. But the first thing is probably even most important. So if we look to the future of society, we have to look to the future of knowledge, and we should invest laws, regulation, and money, public money, in equal access to knowledge. Thank you.
Marco, thank you very much for your speech and for your patience. You are the last, but for sure not the least. I would say a couple of words that I probably don't agree with you on priorities, but of course I agree with you that knowledge is a master key tool for our future society. So unfortunately, I would like to have a second round on and a real debate that, you know, probably will, but 2 hours almost gone away. I don't know how it's possible, but always almost 2 hours running out. So I would just pose you all a question, because we are talking about at the very beginning of our working table, of our discussion, we're talking about the playground. Of course, I would say that my playground, my favorite playgrounds, it's not even planet Earth, but the whole universe. Because, you know, but yeah, you're laughing out, but it is true. But unfortunately, we have to start from, you know, yeah, from little bricks to build a huge wall. So I said at the very beginning that the first playground we can maybe afford, and I would like to afford, is Europe. That's probably because I come from Italy, and we are facing out probably 40 years of, let's say, not so good government, at least in my opinion. So yeah, and so I mean, my faith in Europe is also because my faith in Italian government is not in Italy, in Italians, but in the Italian government. So probably my question is, are we ready for, or do we want? I mean, you can also oppose this vision. I mean, you can say, yes, I'm pro for some reasons. No, I'm cons on other reasons. Are we ready for the state zero or not? Or better, if you prefer, another kind of question is, do we want a state zero, a real state, not like the European Parliament right now, a parliament without powers, a continent without a common constitution, so where each government can say, yes, interesting, I would try to adopt it, or maybe not. I will take care of it. Thank you for the recommendation. But it's not like a state should work. I mean, a huge state. Because of course, we are, you see, we are in this lockdown. The first things that is just, fuck it up was Schengen. Everybody tried to close their borders because of the virus. And what happened then? You close your borders. And in Italy, what happened after? They closed the regions. And after the regions, measures of all citizens, they closed the cities, So it's just like closing back. And now we are closed home. I dislike to live in a world where everybody is getting close to your little garden to make it better, because there will be no garden if anybody of us is looking for their own garden. So my question is, we have just 15 minutes, so just a couple of or 3 minutes for each who want to just answer my question. My question is, are we ready? Are we ready? And do we want the state zero? I will start myself first, and I say that yes, we are ready because we are in trouble, we are frightened, we're worried, we're struggled. So now we can say that a state zero could be a new board. That doesn't mean to throw everything away, but to put all the good things together, but to get rid of national parliaments. I mean, huge old states that comes from centuries ago. That doesn't mean to disrespect people, because people can move everywhere and people can live everywhere with their own origin, respect their own origin, but just get rid of the old ideas of state. So just raise your hand if you wanna just say something, yes or no. Also, no answer is an answer. I myself say yes with double hands. We are ready for the state zero, and we should move forward to it within next 5-10 years, not more, and get rid of Italian, Czech, Icelandic, Spanish, and Brussels, and Dutch and French government. Virginia, you have to unmute yourself. Yeah, unmute yourself. You are muted.
No, I just was saying that Josep just raised his hand.
Sorry, Joseph, I didn't see. Sorry, so please answer. Yeah, you are muted too, Josep. You are muted. You are muted too. You have to unmute. Otherwise,
I don't think I was first to raise my hand, though.
Never mind. Chair is yours, Josep.
Okay, I think we are ready for change, for building a stronger Europe, and possibly the idea of a universal basic income might be a good foundation for Europe to move forward, to put that at the European level, that would strengthen our sense of European community. And I think the scenario is favorable to move in that direction, but I'm skeptical that we can move forward without previously building the community. So I'm in favor of everything that helps build the community, this sense of us, this sense of a common society. Because without this sense of belonging to a common society, it is very difficult to build a common political playground. I think one of the problems of Europe is that someone thought that just by implementing a single currency, people would have a sense of community, of European community, and I don't think that works. It's not that easy. It's more difficult than that. And as you mentioned, when people feel threatened by something that's coming from outside, they don't remember they're Europeans. They think about their national borders or their regional borders or local borders, but the sense of belonging to the European community is just so weak. And if we were thinking about a world without borders, that's a utopia that no one is against, or at least I would not be against. But it's really difficult to see when every political institution, every political regime that we know of so far is based on a sense of community. And unfortunately, the sense of community implies the existence of different communities. So to have a single community it's difficult to foresee, in the sense that obviously if there are no others, if there's not the reference to others, then the sense of community just doesn't make sense conceptually. I fear, and that's the typical challenge that cosmopolitans face, right? I fear that we could perfectly implement a world government, a world without borders, but that in itself would not eliminate the sense of different communities within the world. And so it would make it very complicated to run and to make it effective. So I think that this is my general idea of that.
Thanks a lot, Josep. Thanks a lot for your interesting scenario, and you are absolutely true that without without communities we don't have the others, the sense of the others. So, but I think that in my opinion, the real challenge is to manage the whole in respecting the multiple communities that lives in. That's a real challenge, because what we need is to get connected. So thanks anyway for your thoughts.
If I can say a point on that, I think that my daughter is also wants to say something. I think that the national state can still have some usefulness on some issues, but is in any way nowadays is at the center of politics. So more than discussing in theory if the national state should be completely replaced or not, we have to study ways of counterbalancing from the bottom the power of nation state. From the bottom, and also but from both levels, from communities and from the European and transnational level. Both levels are useful in order to diminish the monopoly of nation states on politics. And this can be achieved through popular initiatives. Because if not, it would be completely utopistic to imagine that the nation state would decide a kind of self-elimination. This will not happen. What can happen is if we are able to use and to reinforce civic participation instruments from the bottom, from municipalities, and also transnational instrument at the level of the European Union and United States, United Nations also.
Thanks, Marco. As now I saw why Josep just asked that you're not the first, but Okta was the first. So I'm sorry, Okta. Just chair is yours. And then you, Virginia. Now I saw you.
Thanks. I think it's very interesting, and I think particularly the last point that Marco made is extremely interesting. The zero state, do we need it? I don't know. Why do we need to zero the state? Why do we need the state? What is the structure that we want to build again and again and again throughout centuries of oppressive systems that never worked for the majority, that never rendered the results that the mob wanted to see? I don't know if we need a state zero. I don't even know what state zero would look like. But what I do know, in what I was thankfully reminded of this week, is that hope is a practice. And if we forget that hope is a practice, none of the systems that we try to make, whether those are technical or state run, will make any sense. If we're not building for hope, we're not building for the future, and we're not building for a reality that we would like to have exist, not for now, but for later. And to Marco's point, the state zero isn't about a bunch of people at the top of it deciding what it's going to look like. We can start small steps to opening borders now. But and I fundamentally disagree on the communities point. I'm a part of many different communities, and I love all of them, and I feel appreciated, valued, and respected in many of them. Although the good point there is absolutely the us versus the others, right? Us and them rhetoric, which has kept us from doing proper actual development as societies for a long time, the us and them. However, if you're going to remove the borders, if you're going to take away the structures that are known, you are sweeping away trust from a fundament that people don't necessarily understand. So when you take those borders away, you cannot take the identity away, and you have to ask the fundamental question, which is, what are people using borders for? What do they represent to them? And what is it within their fundamental the foundation of their lives that they needed them for? And what are you going to do to replace that? Because you will never build trust, and you will never change anything if you do not recognize the fear, the lack of understanding, the lack of resources, or the reasons behind us staying within oppressive structures, not just now, but in the past and in the future. So, I don't know, the zero state, I'm more of a rainbow person. I don't want the zero. It doesn't mean I want to patch really bad software constantly. I'm not pro Microsoft. However, I want us to understand that the system that we have now, although broken, served a purpose. And so if we're going to change that, we need to figure out what we're going to replace it with. And that doesn't need to be a zero-sum game. You don't have to, sometimes you need to burn it down and salt the earth so nothing ever grows there again. We have systemic oppression in systems like that, absolutely. But when it comes to this, I think there are many different ways that we can go about it, right? But before, we have to start somewhere, right? So if we're going to open up borders, we're going to have to understand what it is that makes us unique, what it is about our different cultures and different communities that resonates with the individual and that group of people, and what it means to keep adding layers to that structure. I think a lot of people that are involved in politics, particular pirate politics, view themselves as Europeans. But are they Europeans before they are Czech? Are they Europeans before they are Italian? Are they Europeans before they support their local football team? Are they Europeans before they are their gender identity or whatever it is, however the privilege is built up, right? I don't know, but I know it's interesting, and I know it's a conversation that needs to be had before we start talking about the zero state.
Okay, next time we'll do it. Hope is a practice. I want a T-shirt. Okay, you own me a T-shirt. Hope is a practice. Okay, Virginia, you have 2 minutes. Close the session. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Go super quickly.
Marianna and Marcel, I'm sorry, but we're running out of time. So Virginia will close the session.
I'll go very quickly. I think the zero state, it reminds me of a super state. So I think the more you enlarge the entity, it's still an entity that controls. So I wouldn't feel very confident. I see a risk of, in any case, of defensiveness of the thing. What I do believe, though, is that each level, it could be super local because there is architectural barrier in my streets and I don't know, if I have a wheelchair, I can go there. Or as an LGBT person, or which is transnational, or the environmental struggle, which is transnational. I think each community or small structure should have the processes, the tools, and the instruments to impact itself. And also the borders between one thing and the other should be open enough so that things can move in a fluid manner between the different governmental institutions that are in place. But I think it's more about the process than the size of the borders, in my opinion.
Marcel, you raise your hand or not?
Yes, I'd like to add in. I know that
30 seconds. 30 seconds.
Yeah, the time is short, but I'll be very quick. I just wanted to say that we are definitely ready for evolution, as we always have. Sometimes we move slower, sometimes we move faster, but now the crisis basically amplifies the issues that we've been facing and shows us what we need to work on, in a way shows us the way forward. And the question is whether we follow. The pirates have always said sharing is caring, and the crisis clearly demonstrates that. We need to reform monopolies, we need to restructure economy, we need to increase protection of fundamental rights and democracy, we need to promote open technologies, we need to upgrade tools underpinning democratic processes, and we definitely need more cooperation regardless of borders, regardless of lines on the map. That's what we need.
Thank you, Marcel. Marianna, give us just last word, because I have to close it.
Okay, sorry, I wasn't expecting this. Yes, I stand, maybe as often happens as a halfway house. I would like to see a United States of Europe, so not an abandonment completely, but much more conversion than we have today. I do think we're ready for it. I feel European, I do.
I feel European too. So thank you very much, my friends. I have to thank you all from my deep heart, and hopefully it's a promise. Someday we will rejoin us in the real table. Okay, in a real table, in front of something to eat, something to drink, and then later something to talk about. Okay.
Okay.
I promise. So thank you
Okay.
so much.
Ciao. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank
Ciao.
you.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Amore, io devo